Okay, so this is the first of four, depending on what order you're going in, the first of four teacher style videos. So we have head teachers, heart teachers, body teachers, and spirit teachers. So let's get right into it, and we'll talk about these and what can remedy, what are the strengths and weaknesses of each one. And really all of us are combinations, as is usually the case. So if your teaching style is dominated by your intellect, here are the signs. Number one, you're strong in academics, subject content, and organization. But this strength may cause a blind spot in your teaching. Two, this can be common in math and the sciences to be a head teacher. Three, if the material comes very naturally to you, you may move through it too quickly for students to grasp it. And four, it may be hard for you to see where students get lost or confused in your explanation. Often this comes from your mind simplifying 2 or 3 steps into one, and the students get lost in that leap. So, what can you do? Number one, you can begin every lesson by slowly explaining each of the basic steps. 2, repeat. Do this by showing the entire process and all of the steps on a different problem or a different situation. Then explain the concept, technique, or skill in an entirely different way if possible. So use spatial examples rather than numerical, or use analogies to illustrate the relationships differently. Approach it from a different angle. In another video, we talk about teaching one idea 3 ways rather than 3 ideas in one way. Sort of the same concept. So number 4, have students do a practice problem, compare answers, and possibly work with a partner. 5, you can just ask, what seems confusing? Where are you getting stuck? Rather than waiting for them to, because no one wants to seem like the only one who's not getting it. And 6, work out problems that students struggle with on the board, or have them come up and do problems on the board so you can see where they get off track. That's a good one. And 7, also notice students' body language. While they're working out problems, they have a certain body language, and that is one of your forms of feedback telling you whether you should slow down or move forward. I remember as a college freshman, my calculus teacher said to a room of 300 people, he said, if you have a question about the lecture, just refer to the textbook because I wrote it. So, I mean, that didn't really help very much. I just thought, what? And so there's also, you know, a classic line I've heard from math teachers is that at a certain point in figuring out, say, a calculus problem, they'll just say, okay, the rest is just algebra, and they'll move on. And I literally had an Algebra 2 teacher say that one time, but the entire class technically was algebra, so you can't just say, and the rest is algebra. Anyway, it just reminded me of that. So on that note, what is one of the biggest causes of students getting confused in a math and science class? Well, usually the process has become so intuitive for talented teachers that their minds simply narrow down the multiple steps into one, and students aren't understanding that leap. So if you tend to move quickly through material, it's crucial to go into a beginner's mindset and over-explain. Overly break things down, especially the first time you explain them. It's not enough to teach to the brightest students in the room. Sometimes subconsciously we're teaching to the brightest students in the room, or conversely to the slowest students in the room. But you must go at a slow enough pace and create an emotionally safe environment for average students. And although you're an expert, this is their first time. Assume that they know nothing. As long as we're aware of this, we can remember to adjust for at least, you know, the ability to check in with other levels of students. If you tend to oversimplify or over-streamline your lessons or explanations, and if students comment that you move too fast through lectures, then you're likely unknowingly teaching only to the best students in the room. Remember that all students can learn if you explain it well enough. And it's your job and your duty to find a way to make the information clear to all students, especially the ones that think or learn differently than you do. So to remedy this, I tell myself to explain each problem again in a different way, coming from a different point of view or using different words. And again, metaphors and analogies are golden. If you can't explain it in a different way with a metaphor and an analogy, then do another problem that's very similar so students can see the whole process done slowly, step by step, at least 2 times on 2 different problems. Another really important one is explain your thought process for each and every step. All right, so another good technique is to give students practice problems and then let them compare their answers with someone sitting near them. Then ask for a show of hands, how many pairs got the same answer? How many people feel 90% confident they got it right? So, you look at the hands and body language and you do your best to assess how many students are on board and how many need more guidance. You may even want to consider videoing yourself, explaining all the core skill lessons and building a video library over time. We talked about this in another video. So that when students struggle or they miss that day, you can just email them a link or have the whole explanation library available at all times for students to review it or prepare for tests. You can also search existing videos that teach these skills on YouTube. Those are pretty common, and use these for supplementary materials for students that just need to hear the information several times. Okay, so head teachers can constantly improve their teaching by paying more attention to students' emotional state. And as teachers, we have to realize that students may be dealing with potentially years of shame or fear, especially around math, reading, and the sciences. At a young age, when they were very open and vulnerable, they may have gotten something wrong. Someone may have laughed at them or told them you can't do this, you aren't smart enough, and that moment still may define them. So they can develop what is called an internal locus of control, and they attribute their failure in math to a defect inside that's permanent and can never be repaired. This is the opposite of having a growth mindset. It's the ultimate act of courage for them even to show up in your math class each day or science class. And what seems breathtakingly simple for the teacher is a mental Mount Everest to them. So they can be in a very vulnerable state, and being blown off or disregarded by the teacher could be devastating. So let's take math classes as a specific example. In high school and college, many students struggle with completing the math requirement just in order to graduate, and they need your help and your compassion. A lot of the reason that you got the job as a math teacher is because you're good at math. But the job is not being good at math. The job is being good at explaining math, which is an entirely different skill. To do this well requires a coaching mentality with genuine enthusiasm when you realize that their breakthroughs are your biggest wins. Anyone can teach a room full of kids who are good at math. They will learn in spite of a poor teacher. In fact, many of them do exactly that. But to be a great teacher, math or otherwise, we need to understand we aren't teaching just that subject. We're teaching students how to take an emotional journey around that subject to unlock their old limiting beliefs of I can't and teach them to believe that they can. That's really what's happening in the classroom. The content is the easy part. So as a head or intellect teacher, adopting a more emotionally attuned attitude may be your biggest teaching challenge. For students, believing in themselves and moving past their fears, often in math and science and reading, is the hard part. And these are the 2 big emotional hurdles. Being aware and taking these steps that we've just listed in this video will make a big difference. Okay, that's it for the head teachers video. Thanks for joining in.